Good afternoon. This is Sahara. Today I'm going to be doing some charts of some clients and from some very enigmatic people that have graced the last century. And Grace is the name of the game today. We're going to be looking at Princess Grace. But first, let me show you where I get to televise from. I have a modest little bungalow up in the mountains, and it gives me the privacy and clear skies to look up at the moon and the stars and the celestial bodies. Sometimes I get a break and I get to go out on a clear day and look out over the principality and the beautiful Mediterranean Sea. And this is where I can get fresh air and higher consciousness to look at something much bigger than I am. Today we're going to look at one of our greatest enigmatic women of the last century. She had almost everything, and that makes exploring her chart more fascinating. How can you use a perfect chart with perfect karma? Just everything that you really think you want in life is offered to her. We're going to look at some of the major players in her chart. Let me get my pointer. I might go out on the balcony tonight and look up in my observatory. Here we have a double Scorpio. You have the rising sign is Scorpio, a very heavy and deep sign. Scorpios, it's all about the Scorpio. They are so entrapped in their own deep world that they often don't really relate to other people. They only explore their inner consciousness. They're quite often psychiatrists and surgeons, and they're ruled by the planet Pluto, which explains a little bit about their personalities. But they are deep, and with that depth, they can discover things and make things in our world that we really need because they're good scientists and psychologists. So we have Scorpio rising at 4 degrees. We have 19 degrees of Scorpio. By the way, 19 is a lucky number. If you add 1 plus 9, it equals 10. And that's a perfect 10. The 10 number, quite often, is a bachelor. 1, the number 1 means just that, 1. So very often, anybody with 1 predominant in their name or their charts is going to be singular. It's numerology does play a part in our lives. So let's look at the sun, 19 degrees of Scorpio. And I'm going to point out this amazing grand trine that I don't know what the odds are of this popping up, but that's it. You got all that you need right there. We have the Scorpio sun, and if you're learning astrology, it's fun to read about Scorpios and relate it to this particular chart because although she did not show her Scorpio side in her public life, she was indeed a Scorpio. Pisces moon. What is more dreamy than a Pisces moon? They live in a dream world, the Pisces. And the moon, even more so. The moon shows how you think, what your inner calling is. You look up to the sky for guidance. You often have a religious background and you have deep faith. And if for some reason you have Pisces in your chart and you don't feel that religious calling, I guarantee you, you had religion in your past, spirituality, metaphysics, you name it. And you'll always come back to it as the place that you belong. Now, this is two things, this grand trine. Water, this is a water sign, Scorpio. Water, Cancer, this is deep and introspective at Cancer. Cancer's like often antique things. And Pisces. There's nothing more watery than Pisces. Pisces is ruled by Neptune, god of the sea. So you have, and this has big influence on her, as you'll see. Um, the nice thing is, well, I don't want to get into aspects right now. Now, the next interesting thing about her is her major planets. The sun, over here, the moon in the 5th house, and Pluto in the 9th house. They're all the fire signs. And fire is just what it says. Fire is always a popular sign. Mick Jagger is rumored to be like a triple fire sign. You're going to be up front and you're going to be, it's all about me. Fire signs are the most popular. People love to be around that energy. But fire is all about me. It's not particularly a couple sign, but it sure is for being out in public and out front, because fire is fire. Think of Mick Jagger. Think of his persona and how big it is. So you have all these firehouses: fire, 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 water, water, and water. What does that say? Just gotta think about that personality a little bit. I'm very fluid. I'm deep beyond belief. I'm holding so much in, and I crave illusion. And this is, when you have a trine from Pluto, this is amazing regenerative ability. Pluto it's a whole lecture in itself. But it is the phoenix that self-destructs. Everything gets destroyed, like in an earthquake, because Pluto rules the underworld. And it rebuilds. This is the thing that rebuilds your life, because the phoenix is born anew amidst the ashes. So here's this magnificent, I call this water fire. It is a water fire chart. When you have a water fire, you have got to balance out with earthy things. Even what you eat can be things that come from the ground, like potatoes. Uh, that's very grounding. And think of things like digging in a garden. You're grounding yourself right there. And if you have plants around you in your environment, really important. Think about the clothes that you wear too. And the earth signs usually like beige, brown, black, very earthy. And black in Chinese feng shui is water. So anything that is a subdued and grounding. I think plants in the bedroom and in the main living area, that's earthy. They're plants. Plants come from the earth. walk barefoot. Now, you're going to see that none of these descriptions fit her very well. She was a shining star in Hollywood at age 21. She had the world in her pocket by the time she was 26. And she married a handsome prince, came to town, more or less, short story, and proposed to her. It was a whirlwind romance, and the deal was, come be the Princess of Monaco. I have a whole kingdom. I have a castle. If you come and live with me, you can be a princess. Well, gee whiz. Are you going to turn an offer like that down? Plus, this guy is enigmatic and dashing. So you have a dashing prince comes to town and says, your castle is waiting. However, you will be a public figure and you cannot be on the stage. You will have to lead a royal life of subdued grandeur and help me with my kingdom, and they'll be your subjects. So she agreed. What she loved most was acting. She showed early signs that she wanted to dance and act. Of course she did. She seeks illusion. This is Pisces. I need something deep. If I get parts that have depth to it, I'm happy. And so these are her major things. Now, the first house is ruled by Aries. Aries says it's all about me. Not particularly in the negative sense, if you know Aries. But they are all about me. What they're working on is themselves. Scorpio, you can double and triple that right there. Scorpios is working on the inside. And there's an inner world that nobody knows, not even the Scorpios, but it's their job in this lifetime to uncover that. And with Pluto in a good placement, Pluto digs down and goes there and takes care of the shadow side of our personalities. Now let's look over at the fifth house. This is the first house, second house, third house, fourth house tells something about your home, and fifth house. Well, the fifth house is an interesting place. The fifth house is the love house. This is what your romantic affairs will be like, and people that you date and court. This is a marriage house up here. They're very different. The way you behave when you're courting and the way you behave when you're married are two different things. So this is kind of a high liver right away. A playgirl. Dating and affairs is what you're all about. And Scorpio, well, if you know Scorpios like I know Scorpios, they are this house of sexuality. And Grace did that. She was a really fancy movie star, and everybody wanted to be her. She was a rising star at the same time that Marilyn Monroe was. Grace would get often more fan mail than Marilyn Monroe, and that allowed her to pick deep and dramatic roles because she wanted to prove herself. And Marilyn Monroe, she had other ideas about what she wanted to do. Alfred Hitchcock and Grace were tremendous friends, and Alfred Hitchcock said of Marilyn that Marilyn had a brain like Swiss cheese. But Grace was the ice queen on the outside and a simmering volcano on the inside. You could use that to describe a Scorpio because they're a little aloof. You don't get to know them that well if you ever do know them. However, they're a sexual sign. So there's a lot of intimate uh, relationships, but not deep. Now let's look at some data on Princess Grace. This is a publicity shot. She had zillions of them. She had so many movies. She was a starlet of major proportions from 1951 to 1956. That's not very long. However, she made one movie after another, and each time she was climbing higher on the star status, and her leading men were always the object of her affection, and she fell in love with all the great leading men of the time, and she got to play sultry, sexy uh, parts with them. But the studio wanted to present her as the more refined Marilyn Monroe, and to keep her image uh, acceptable to the public, they were always paying off people not to talk, because she was very, very, very active during those days. Now it's time for me to step out of the castle and take a closer look at the Prince and Princess of Monaco. You must remember that at the time of their marriage, the Second World War was still very fresh in our memory. Um, we're talking, it had been maybe 12 years since a major world war, and people needed this escape. So she meets the prince, he proposes, says, I've got a kingdom and a castle for you, in the beautiful Mediterranean little kingdom of Monaco. Your first duty is to be princess and reside over your subjects. That sounded good at the time. This is pretty good for a 26-year-old woman. Her mother, her father, her siblings, and half of Hollywood got to attend. It was the most publicized event, not just wedding, but event in television history. And television was relatively, what is it? It was just starting to come onto the scene in 1956. And here she is with her handsome prince. And what a beautiful sight that is. Here is another shot of this amazing royal couple in their palace after the wedding. Her father got to walk her down the aisle, and she had the most beautiful dress in history. And she was the most beautiful woman in the world. But before we move on to her castle and her prince and her kingdom, her jewelry, her gowns, and the life of royalty on the continent, let's take a look at some of her films. And you have to think this all took place in a window of 5 years or less. There is, down here we've got one of her first movies. She got a lot of attention in 1951 on a drama of 14 hours where a policeman is trying to save somebody from jumping off a bridge. Okay, she did a great job. She went on to uh, make one movie after another. We have Rear Window, famous leading men. She falls in love with all of them. To Catch a Thief with Clark Gable. Oh my God. And all her leading men were 20, 30 years older than her. But it is said that she, even though she had a nice dad, he was demanding, and he was never happy with her because she wasn't athletic like the rest of the kids. And so she retreated into her little fantasy world. If you have a Pisces moon child, you've got to expect that. High society, right here, you see that she had, she could at least dance a little bit on the stage. She also made a one-hit record, so she had the ability to sing. But it was her drama that she wanted to um, broaden on. The Country Girl was a huge success. Um, High Noon, I think, I'm not sure if that's where she won her Academy Award. That's pretty amazing for a young woman. I should imagine you're quite blown away uh, at when you have one hit after another like that. And her reputation was a cool, calm, regal type persona um, that was kind of an ice queen, but that wasn't the reality. We have a double Scorpio here. Oh my goodness, you've got to watch out for that. If you're ever going to get married, it's a very good idea to have an astrologer look at your chart first, not afterwards. um, Here's the Swan, and the Swan was her last movie, and it mirrored her life a lot. The bridges over, um, the bridges at Tokyo Rai. I'm not familiar with this one. Um, Green Fire, and those were amazing um, pictures. But you see that the major roles go from 1951 to 1956. Then we don't see her anymore. The next time we see her, she's dancing with a prince. So, but that's not the end of our story, because we don't, it's nice to have a fairy tale, but let's look into the forces, the huge forces that were a motivating um, influence. You have a young girl coming from a more or less uh, upper class home, and the father was a tremendous um, social climber. He started off as a brick layer and made his money in construction. He knew not to, he had a bad feeling about the stock market. So the crash of 1930 did not affect his family. Everybody else was devastated. You see, she was always protected somehow. And so the social climbing dad suddenly went from ignoring her to her royal wedding in Hollywood. And her parents tried their best to watch over her when she was in Hollywood. The reputations were reaching her parents' home in Philadelphia, and they were quite horrified, but she's a Scorpio. You see, I really think if you have a child, you gotta have a look at their charts, um, so that you can understand. Her brothers and sisters could be athletic; they had it in them. She had a dream world, and it was said that she was the runt of the litter, little, small, and scrawny, and that her she had frail health. I don't think so. I just think that uh, they weren't paying any attention to what her problems were, because she had excellent health, and we're going to see why. I think before we took that little astrological break, I think we went over the magnificent Grand Trine, but fiery and watery. Water's deep and fire ignites. What a combination. Scorpios, I'm sorry, but Scorpios is all about them. It's because they have a lot of to get straight with themselves, probably left over from lifetime after lifetime, and they spend their life either analyzing by being a psychiatrist or on the couch with deep introspection all the time. Her major planets are in the first house of me. You see, each house shows where has an area of life. Um, this is your money. This is your brothers and sisters and your neighborhood. Um, this is your home. And you know, it's funny. Her chart doesn't have that much about the condition of the home, and it seems like I think that probably Mercury squaring the midheaven and the fourth house had probably she was never quite comfortable um, living with a lot of people. She's happier alone because this is the fourth house. This shows the parents are cool and aloof. Um, you have Aquarius ruling here. The moon in Pisces. I dream. I'm a dreamer. However, the dream is real to me. This is what the Pisces moon says. And they're dreamers. Listen, with all this water, too, she must have had weight problems all over the place. Uh, was probably one of her biggest challenges. And she did get into alcohol and drugs later on. Not too, a little bit serious, but she was able to hold it together. And once again, in in her wild days in Paris, when she was separated from the prince, people had to be paid off to be quiet. And the press, of course, the paparazzi, they love this stuff. The problem is, you can't tell what's real because they make things up. And she complained about that. If you see her in any interviews, you're going to see a calm, collected, reserved royal with tremendous poise. That wasn't the real her. I'm sorry. She was just a wild child. And this brought her the unruly princesses. And the princesses would go off to live with her sometimes in her Paris apartment. And they were kind of wild. Just the youngest, Princess Stephanie, is the most interesting. Uh, she had a boyfriend much older than her, and all she wanted to run away with him, and she didn't want to go to college. She wanted to go to race car school to be a race car driver. Well, this would make the parents crazy because of her stature in life. Holding holding that kind of energy down is difficult, and it would show. They say that when Princess Grace went over the cliff that killed her, um, she was fighting with her daughter. I think they were on their way back to their Paris apartment, and Grace suffered a stroke and drove off of 100-foot cliff with Stephanie in the car, and Stephanie was not hurt, but Princess Grace, for all things considered, died on the spot. Um, they pulled the plug on her the next day because they couldn't, she was essentially dead. But she never knew it. This is part of a blessed life. You pass out and you're dead. Okay? That is no suffering. And I'd like to tell the story of my mother, who this was the last entry in her diary. She said the only way to avoid old age is to die young. She caught, that was her last entry. She caught a very rare virus that killed her within hours. It's called Blackburn's disease or virus. Very rare, but it found her and she died at 56. 56 is young. So Princess Grace died at 52. I want you to think about what her injuries were. First of all, it was said with her family that she was frail. Well, she lived with a lot of athletes. She wasn't frail. This is an aspect of immense health. You have trine between the sun and the moon means you're going to have pretty good health. If you get sick, you can regenerate very easily. With Pluto, it regenerates, it grows up anew. This really kind of a salamander that can lose a tail and grow a new one. But the most besides it being in the first house ruled by Mars, Aries, and it's all about me. But this Mercury shows what you think about. Mars shows what you desire, and Mars, Venus shows what you desire, and Mars shows how you're going to go about getting what you want. And this is where you put your energy. But Mars is a red planet. It rules the head and the blood. They're both red. And when you have these aspects, there's a problem with the blood. It's very important to have your blood pressure checked. And often with Libra aspects, you will have rare blood disorders that can be diagnosed. I knew a triple Libra, and she had a rare blood disease that she got in Africa. And she had, among many things, she had to go to the doctors about every 3 months and have her hemoglobin removed. She had too much. She was too red. And all of her planets were in this Libra. It was all Libra in the first half. So you're going to have strange occurrences with the blood. Blood clots are very common, and head injuries are very common. What did she die from? A stroke going over an embankment and killed more or less instantly on impact. Her daughter was not thrown free, but she was able to crawl out, and we'll look at some pictures of the daughter. And the daughter didn't get to go to Grace's funeral. She was still recuperating, and this was not a really bad accident. But of course, the paparazzi said she was arguing with Stephanie, as she always did, because Stephanie was a wild child. And you wonder where she got that from. We have a mom with a moon in the 5th house of lovers. Now, this is also acting. And so we have the 5th house of entertainment. She came in to act, to feel with her water personality the roles, and she was instant success. She wanted to prove that she just wasn't all about beauty. She wanted that depth of a Bette Davis. So you have Mars, and it's very close to the sun. It's also trine Pluto. So she had a stroke, which is blood clot, and died instantly due to a blow to the head, which that's like putting it mildly if you saw pictures of the accident. So here we are with, let's look a little bit at our prince. The prince was, first I want to point this out. Venus, Ascendant, Mercury. They're all interplaying here. The Ascendant is on the midpoint of these two planets. More or less, they're hanging out together and influencing each other. Mercury is the way you think. It's also the way you express yourself. and Venus is what you love, and this is my environment, who I am. So what do you have? You have a love of language and expressing yourself. We have a movie star that could sing, dance, and express herself. She probably had an uncanny ability with numbers. The Venus in Mercury is an uncanny ability with numbers, and I've seen that before. Poetry. Oh, they love poetry. Anything with the written and um, arts. And finally, all of her problems in Monica was because she just had to be a princess. She couldn't go back to the stage, she really loved. Finally, the principality caved in and let her go and read some poetry to a small audience. She carried her, she did something else very interesting in reference to the Mars, which is blood, and head, blows to the head. She she worked very hard in her little principality to work with the Red Cross. You got to think about the symbol for the Red Cross. And of course, what they do is they have blood drives all the time. So it shows in her chart. Now, here we have something about her children. And as well, talk about children. The fifth house is your children. She had a little acting, not little, but a really nice little school for dramatic arts and dancing for young people. Of course, that made the principality like her even more. She brought beauty and charm to Monaco, and all the little children could play music, read poetry, and dance, all the things that Grace loved. Still, Grace is enamored with being on stage. She had it all so quick, and so it the seventh house tells you a little bit about the partner. Who's your marriage partner? That's the seventh house. This is me, and this is you, and you're going to see the